Hi there. My name's Tommy Yionoulis, and I am the host of the brand new podcast, Empire Builders, Scaling Success One Location at a Time. This is a podcast dedicated to talking to the founders and the current leadership of those large multi-location brands that you see every single day where you eat and shop at. And we want to find out from these guys, why this business, right? Why of all the things you could do in the world, you chose to do this? We're going to learn what their challenges were at the beginning, what almost broke them. We're going to learn what they're facing today. And as always, we're going to end the show with a wonderful war story. That's one of those stories where you go, I can't believe we got through this. It was insanity, and hopefully they always end with a nice little laugh. So I can't tell you how excited I am to bring you these interviews with these amazing guests and just stoke that entrepreneurial flame that we all have to learn what it took to kind of get where they are today and how they got successful. So thank you for joining us, and I look forward to sharing these wonderful interviews with you. Hey there, Empire Builders listeners. It's Tommy, and I'm back with a brand new episode. I want to thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast and just supporting these guys and all the guests and their stories about entrepreneurship and how they are growing their businesses. So I have a great guest for you today. Please welcome Orhan Veli. Orhan, how you doing, man?
Hey, Tommy. Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for being on the show today. This is my second podcast, as I mentioned to you earlier, and I like to go on the same 5 questions every time. And so it's just an easy way to kind of manage it. So let's go to the first question today, which is, please tell me about yourself and your company or companies.
So, Orhan Veli, I am a franchisee for a company called Saladworks. It's a quick service restaurant, healthy eating. Saladworks has been around since the 1980s. So kind of they made salads cool before salads were cool. Yeah, Saladworks is part of Wow Brands. So it's a conglomerate of different franchises, but all kind of concentrated on the healthy eating side. So I've been doing this since 2011. My partner in my business is my father. We run this together, and we are the largest Saladworks franchisee in the United States. It sounds a lot bigger than it actually is. We have 11 brick and mortar locations, and the 12th is inside a supermarket, giant supermarket, and we have 28 giant supermarkets where we distribute salads to. So yeah, it's a good size organization, and we grew it one location at a time, one step at a time. So I think that kind of fits to the kind of people you want to speak to. So.
Absolutely. Are you on the East Coast? Where are you on the East Coast?
So Philadelphia metro area.
Okay.
I'm right outside of Philadelphia, in the suburbs, and all of our restaurants are concentrated all around Philadelphia, all through Jersey, Central and South New Jersey.
So I grew up in Maryland and went to Valley Forge Military in Wayne.
Okay. Yeah, we have a location in Wayne in the Gateway Shopping Center. If you've ever been there. Yeah.
That's really cool. I love Wayne in the wintertime. For those of you who know, Wayne's on the main line up by Villanova and what's that famous women's college? Bryn Mawr.
Yeah.
It's like old school 1700s houses. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's awesome.
It's fantastic. It's absolutely beautiful. Yeah. I agree with you.
Okay. So you have 11 Saladworks, and then your support. So you're basically filling cases for 30 giants as well. So do you have a production kitchen, or do you just cook or do you just prep the salads, almost like a catering order out of the restaurants?
Yeah, essentially so it's a hybrid of the two. So we've picked 3 locations that have heavier volumes. So then we're leveraging the labor that is already in those locations to prepare these. We have 2 routes that we've established. There's a route driver and a refrigerated truck that goes out, picks up these salads, and delivers to each of the giant supermarket locations on a daily basis. And we do this 6 days a week. What we found is, the typical grocery store vendor, they're there once a week, once every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
With a product like salads, you can't it's got to be a daily basis. You got to touch this product because the speed with which your product deteriorates is pretty quick, and the freshness is the thing that really keeps people coming back. So it's a fantastic product when it's done correctly, and to do it correctly, it involves a lot of work and a lot of logistical practices that, but we started with one, and I got in the car and I said, well, I'll do this. And I did that for, and it was a cool thing to do because I haven't been hands-on for years now. I'm in an office 5-6 days a week. I go and do site visits to our restaurants, but I'm not physically, doing this stuff. And this was interesting because to set this up, I was like, well, in order for me to manage this process, I have to know the process. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's very interesting knowing the process intellectually or knowing it when you do it physically. So went through that, and that allowed us to kind of come up with a system, and it's working. It's been growing from, like I said, in the last 2 years, we started with just one, and it's been scaling.
It's interesting is that, there's a lot of things I want to touch on with salads specifically, but it's funny because we have large sushi clients, and they are franchises, but they work inside the grocery stores, and they will often do the same thing you're doing. They will get one store that's bigger, that's got a sushi counter area, and then they will have sushi cases at maybe 5 other stores. And so they're doing the same thing. They're prepping sushi for 6 locations in one location and then driving it to those cases and stocking them. And they probably have an equal perishability factor as salads. I mean, as we all know, salads brown and they start to deteriorate and get liquidy. It's gross. What's funny about the restaurant industry, and I would say probably 10 times harder for you than a normal restaurant, is you can't freeze stuff, and perishability, you're walking that razor's edge of perishability on all levels all the time, right?
Correct. Yes.
And that requires you to be so much more of a skilled operator and having better processes because you make a mistake. It's all soggy. I mean, we all do it. We throw a bag of lettuce in the fridge at home, and then you go out one night, and then you forget about it, and you turn it back, and it's a bag of soup, like green soup. It's disgusting.
It's 100% correct. Yeah, I mean, to manage this, it's not just managing the food of it though, because you're managing the labor that's going to take care of prepping this food. You're doing that against the projected sales that you have, and they're projections. They're not reality. So the amount of different inputs that you have to put into your projections to kind of estimate close to reality becomes quite, the weather, the holiday season, it's consumer spending. So you're throwing all these things against your previous year's data, your trend line, just to arrive. And then from that, you have to figure out, I'm going to do whatever, $5,000 of sales tomorrow. What does that mean in terms of lettuce production? So you're figuring out this yield, and with the salad business, the way our menu works, 70% of the total sales that we do is salads, and then about 80% of that is create your own salads, where people create their own recipes. And when they're creating their own recipes, there is no algorithm to predict what the next person is gonna. So you kind of you do an average, and with all that in mind, you kind of it's this thing where you can't just put together a mathematical prediction that will just be on, because it's going to be on long term. But tomorrow when it rains and you got a bus full of kids that comes in that don't like spray mix but like iceberg, your whole model just goes off the rails, and you got to be ready for it. At the same time, if you over prep or if you're overstaffed, your employees still, the margins are so slim that it's so easy just to lose, what you're doing or end up with a mess. So yeah, it's but for me, it's like when you're a kid and the first time you get that Rubik's Cube in your hands, and you can spend hours trying to solve it. And it's just interesting. It's just fun. You're fascinated by this concept. So this is how I kind of, back in 2011, 12, I walked into this, and this was not the first restaurant concept I was in. The previous one had a fixed menu, which is a lot easier to calculate yields and things like that. Yeah. this was like, man, how do I figure out a system to manage this and do it well? And I think we've done okay.
Nice.
You know, yeah.
Well, I think what's interesting too is like you kind of described. So, one of the struggles I think with keeping good managers in the hospitality industry, right, is that it is a very repetitive job, right? I mean, anybody who's worked a couple of shifts in a restaurant, like opens every day, you don't even remember what day it is, like by the third or fourth day, you're like, well, did I do this yet or whatever? And, but what it takes to be a long-term success in the hospitality split restaurant business, because it is a lot of like Groundhog Day, if you will, is that you have to find the really interesting parts of the business to you that you can really sink your teeth into so that you can go, we're an operations business. We're going to be open 363 days a year and we're going to make salads every single day. And we're not mixing that up, right? Like we're not going to all of a sudden sell pasta one day. Like we're going to just do the same thing every day. So you got to find those things that you can really sink your teeth into intellectually to make it exciting and fun. And so you can do it for 30 years. And some people, it's all about the customer relationships, right? For some people I found it's all about mentoring and training that next generation of people. And especially because so many people who come into the hospitality industry, at least at the beginning levels, they're not coming from they're not like some wealthy guy in a mansion who goes, hey, I want to make salads, so you can really help people kind of change their life trajectory, right? That's another thing. And then another version of it's what you just said. It's how do I figure this out? How do I crack the code? How can I get this to be more efficient? The process part of it, which is what I love, the sinking my teeth into was the process part of it. So I think that's really great that you've kind of like figured that out and it found something that's going to keep you engaged, right? And keep you wanting to grow and make it bigger and better. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's the two things they just described. They're like the yin and the yang, and usually meaning the process behind the scenes of operations, of the numbers management, right? And it's if you don't do that, you don't have a business. But on the flip side, if you don't run the front of the house, that customer service, the quality, the morale, you don't have a business either. Those two things. It's like, but so like I know that I'm more of a numbers behind the scenes guy, and I know how to organize them. I know I'm an accountant by education, so that speaks to me. But I know that if you don't do this other part, and I spent a good 6 years of my life behind the counter, making the food, ringing the register, talking to people, and I just realized early on, like I would hire somebody and they would just have this fantastic personality. Yeah. And I would see how they draw people in. I just go through the motions. And it's not because I don't want to give that fantastic customer service. I just don't have that skill set. Sure. And it's like, you can do it really, anybody can fake it the first like 3 hours of the day, but get to hour 10 when you're like, do it then, right? And then there's those people who just do it. Like that's their thing. So figuring that out and understanding that like, if you have to find the right people to run the right positions. That was probably even before the numbers thing. That was probably the first thing, like the aha moment in my head. Like, all right, if I find these right people and they can do the things that I can't, or I'm not as good as they are, man, together as a team, we can really build something that's truly scalable, truly successful. And it's that yin yang, like, and it comes together. Yeah, in our business, the people that I'm surrounded by, and I've had managers that have been with me, for well over a decade, and we don't have high turnover when it comes to management. To be honest with you, before COVID happened, we really didn't have a high turnover at all. Post-COVID, the world has changed. People are jumping place to place a lot more. It's a lot more. It used to be more static. Now it's a lot more dynamic. But on the management level, these aren't just like, there's not like, each one of them has a function within. They're not just an employee. They're part of the system that works. So it's a cool thing, and I really enjoy like that whole process of it. For me, I look at business, if you any business, but particularly the one I'm in, you really have to enjoy. You have to enjoy this whole thing that you're doing. The consequences, whether you make money and a good lifestyle and freedom potentially, But like, if you don't enjoy it, you're never going to get to that consequence. That's a discovery, after about 17 years of doing this, that like I'm doubling, tripling down on.
Oh, that's really cool. And for years, because I've written hundreds of blogs and interviewed all these people and stuff. For years, I was like, the restaurant industry's got turnover. The restaurant's got turnover. No, it doesn't. Bad managed restaurants have high turnover. Well-managed restaurants have very low turnover. If people are happy, they're making money, they're busy because the restaurant's well run, and their manager actually takes care of them and cares about them a little bit, people will stay there for 30 years, right? Because people don't looking to go and have to fill out an application, get all new uniforms, get trained up, be the low guy on the totem pole. People love to come to work in a place where they know everything. They know that they whack the machine on the side, it starts working again. And, and all you have to do is just, like, in my experiences, is be kind to people and just genuinely care about their lives. And they're going to stay and they're going to be successful, and you're going to be successful with them. And then I feel like this is something that the restaurant industry has lost since COVID. And I haven't waited at a table probably since 2005, maybe. But it used to be that your restaurant where you worked, that was your second family. You had your real family, and then you spent so much time at this restaurant, going out getting beers afterwards, working together. It was your second family. And I hope that I feel like a lot of the restaurants, when you have high turnover, you don't get that world going, and then that's what really, I think, hurts you a lot on your turnover. Okay, that's a great answer. Let's go to question number 2. Why did you guys choose Saladworks? Why did you choose this business?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I'll kind of answer it in a bigger way, because it's like, why do we even choose to be in the restaurant business? And if we look at that question purely from making money, it makes no sense. There are so many businesses out there where the ROI, the return on your investment, and the return on your time is much higher. So if you look at it just from a money standpoint, you clearly can make money in restaurants. I mean, that's 100%. But you can do that in a more efficient way, doing other things. So I'm an immigrant. I'm a refugee. I came from I was born in Azerbaijan, former Soviet Union. Fell apart when I was a kid, and I'm a mixed ethnicity, Russian, Azerbaijani, and Armenian. And there was like pogroms in the city of Baku in the early 90s, late 80s, against anybody who's Armenian. And so we ran and applied for refugee status, and after a couple of years of applications and interviews, arrived in the United States. And it was our starting point. Nothing in my parents' pockets. I was a kid. I was 11 years old, and coming from the Soviet Union, where there was no business, there was no free enterprise, like that didn't exist. That seemed like the best part of the American dream, right? Like, growing up, in my head, that was the key to freedom. That was the key to like a happy life, professionally. But as it goes, like I said, my parents didn't have a whole lot of money at all. They just, my father went back to school here. He was an engineer working for the space station Mir, like designing, their plumbing systems before he, so it was like pretty intelligent guy. But coming over here, he delivered pizza for like 4 years while going to school and all of that. My mom was this like pretty talented artist who, got a job at a factory and did screen printing. And so, growing up was a very blue collar, low income kind of upbringing, which I think molded and shaped in a very positive way. But so I went to college, went to Penn State, studied accounting, got an internship at Morgan Stanley. That led to a job at Morgan Stanley, a really good paycheck, great potential for making lots of money and, having a nice office and things like that. And for a 22-year-old kid, that seemed like, wow, like, it's amazing. And I just got to be honest, I just really disliked every minute of it. It was so foreign to me. I was good at what I was doing, but, it just I was like, am I going to do this for the next like 50 years of my life? Like I can't. And I approached my parents and said, hey guys, would you want to do a business together? And my father was open to it. My mom was cool. She was like, yeah, I mean, they didn't have a lot of money. They had some equity in a townhome that I grew up in. When I say some equity, we're talking like $40,000-$50,000, very little, as starting capital. And we started browsing what type of businesses we could do. We wanted to buy an existing operational business that had some cash flow, so we could predict and, measure out what our debt service is, and, as you scroll these business listings, the most obvious is a restaurant. And I think me, along with many other immigrants who come to the United States, the reason you go into restaurants is it may be a familiar thing, meaning you've had a job at a restaurant. And then number two, it's the most accessible. It's the most surface visible thing.
Yeah.
So as a kid, I worked at McDonald's from like 13 to 17. So I quick service. I knew what quick service was. I was a 17-year-old assistant GM at McDonald's, so like I had a skill understanding of how to run a restaurant. So yeah, we kind of took a plunge. And honestly, to this day, I'm so incredibly thankful to my parents, to my father. At 22, genuinely and honestly, to you and I and anybody else who's going to watch this, the only thing I was truly good at is drinking beer. Like I learned how to do that very well. And for them to like take a second mortgage and borrow all this money and like go into the first restaurant is a pretty incredible thing. Knock on wood, it all worked out. But that, that's how we ended up in the restaurant business. And then the second part of your question, to specifically Saladworks. So the first restaurant was called Charlie's Grilled Subs, Charlie Philly Steaks now. Yeah. We bought an existing location. It was in Philly. We're outside of Philadelphia, and it's actually New Jersey in Morristown. And it was a good business. It was, it ran really well. The only problem is Philadelphia is the home of cheesesteaks. Yeah. So selling a cheesesteak in Philly, man, that's a difficult thing. I didn't realize that going into it. We thought that everybody knows what a cheesesteak is. It'll be easy. Well, everybody sells a cheesesteak. Every mom and pop pizza shop at every corner sells cheesesteaks. So it's a hugely competitive market. And they're able to open a pizza shop around the corner, paying very, very little rent, and in a franchise and royalty. So it's complicated. We were still good, we were successful with it. And then the second part was it's a very labor intensive business. So I ran like the grill for, open and close, 7 days a week, year after year after year, as we're trying to get rid of these loans, this debt. And in the mall food court where we had our location, right across there was Saladworks. And I would look over there and I would see these guys just casually putting together a salad, no heat, no fryers,
face all greasy.
Yeah, I'm like, and I'd walk over there and get myself a salad, 3-4 times a week. I ate salad since I was young, and I just look at them with envy in terms of the operation side of it. It's like, man, these guys got it made. It's like so easy. So when opportunity came, X amount of years later, we got our first location in September of 2006, meeting Charlie's. Obviously, by 2008, the world kind of came to a halt, and the Morristown Mall location really came to a halt. There was a large factory not too far from there. It was a Boeing plant, huge layoffs. Business just 50% of it just died overnight in September of 2008 is when this happened. So it was a really big struggle to kind of keep things going. We had a second location that we had by that point in time, and it was really just taking the money from whatever income we were making in the second location was going to feed the deficit in the first. And then by 2011, an opportunity came to get into Saladworks. I met who then was the largest franchisee, a very nice and humble guy who kind of really guided and helped me out to understand what that business was all about. And he agreed to sell one of his locations to us. And that's, that was the transition into Saladworks. And from there it went.
It's so funny is we have so many like personal, like our lives are very, like we have a lot of like weird intersections. My first job was at Jerry's Subs and Pizza making cheesesteaks at 14. You know, I'm the grandson of immigrants, and my dad was a rocket scientist and worked on all this like space stuff. So it's funny just to think
Yeah.
that. Well, and you know, as you said, like immigrants, we open restaurants because it's a cash business. You can get into it, and anybody can work. You know, to be successful in restaurants requires quite a bit of skill, but it's an easy thing to get into. Like it's not like trying to get into rocket science. You know, like that's hard to get into. You know, you can get in there. You know, food and the math's simple. You know, being a great restaurant manager isn't about being a great you know, it's about managing people and finding the right people and just executing and being kind to your customers. Like anybody can do that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's just an interesting business. Like I was telling you, like that's the menu. My grandfather had a restaurant on Wall Street, and that's the menu for it right behind my head. But
that's so amazing, man.
Yeah, I know. And like my other grandfather, and also you came over here at 11. My dad's dad, who I never met, he died 30 years before I was born. But like he came over here at 12, but he came by himself. You had your parents. Like he literally just was on a boat from Crete to New Orleans and just I live here now. I mean, I can't even
imagine. Can you even imagine? Like that's I don't even know. That builds a very strong character. That's all I know.
I have a 13-year-old boy, and I probably wouldn't let him like walk more than a mile from my house. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I have kids 15, 12, and 3, and the same deal. Like the 15-year-old, by his age, I'm just thinking about myself. By his age, like I traveled on my own.
Yeah,
I'm thinking like this. It's like maybe times are different, maybe we're different. I don't know what it is, but yeah, I agree.
We're coddling these kids. I'm going to send mine on a boat trip.
That's a good idea.
All right. So you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what were some of the early challenges that you faced? With Saladworks or your Charlie's, but what were some of those initial challenges that you really struggled with?
Well, the very first one I'll tell you. So, like during Discovery Day at the Charlie's Philly Steaks, Charlie Sheen, who was the guy who originated that franchise, and he's also an immigrant or a kid of an immigrant from South Korea. And during Discovery Day, he would make sure to meet every single incoming franchisee. And as I came in with my father, and he looked at us, and pretty clean cut, like I just graduated from college, and he looks at me, he goes, like, you're going to have to work a lot. And I said, yeah. He goes, no, not like, yeah, like your life is going to be work. And again, I was like, yeah, of course, man, no problem. And in my head thinking like, yeah, I can do like 45, 50 hours. It's no problem.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that's just if you're starting out to build something, and I don't care from which end you're coming, whether you have loads of capital and you're getting into it, or if you're, no capital and you're going to just bootstrap it. The workload on either side of it is just people totally underestimate how much of your life you're going to have to dedicate to something. If you truly want to build something that is going to scale and is going to move relatively quick, and you're dedicating your life, and that's a challenge that I didn't realize going into it. I mean, I was young, I was naive, but I talk to a lot of people now, and obviously incoming franchisees. I have many conversations. I give them time. I want people to be successful. If I can help them do that, man, that's such a rewarding thing. But one of the things that I just, from my experience, and this is, I tell everybody, be ready. The first 24, 36 months, you're going to work a lot. First 6 months, you're going to like live and breathe this new venture that you're doing. But then beyond that, you're going to work a ton. And it's a 7-day-a-week thing. And it's, whatever the operating hours are, you're on. And then beyond those operating hours, if you're the owner, founder, the brain, the idea guy, your brain has to be on, and those ideas will come to you. Like, and this may sound kind of crazy, but like once in a while, I'll wake up at like 4 a.m. and I'll be like, oh, and I'll run to my phone, open a note and write it down, because I'm like, oh, this is the way we should do this. Right. Like, so that's, the amount of work that goes into it. That's a big thing. It's a big challenge. And it's hard to balance that. I have 3 kids. I'm happily married. I have lots of friends. Life and enjoying life is important to me. And finding that balance, man, that's difficult. It's been difficult, and it hasn't become easier now.
Well, every time, as you're growing, right, you have to come up with new processes and new systems and new managers and all that stuff. I remember when we started this business, I worked probably before we even started this company, we had another company, and I probably spent somewhere between like 2013 and probably like 2017, I probably pulled 50 to 100 all-nighters where I would like literally get up in the morning, work all day, cook dinner, hang out with the family, put everyone to bed, go back to work till like 5, 6, maybe all the way through, get up, do the whole thing again with young kids, and then that night sleep, right? And I remember looking out my window at like 4 a.m. and everyone's sound asleep and the whole neighborhood's quiet. And I'm like, if I ever make millions of dollars, it's going to be because of this moment right now where I'm up just powering through something that has to get done. Yeah. Especially because at the beginning of your business, there's no one to give it to. There's no one to delegate it to. So if you don't do it, it doesn't get done, right?
Yeah, no, and it's what you just said right now, right? Like the thing is, when you're up at that like 4 a.m. doing, putting together whatever it is, working on my cookbooks because I was at work all the rest of the day, and this is the time I can do it, right? There's no promise of success in that moment. There's no promise of money. There's no promise that you're not gonna, go out of business tomorrow. Like, none of that is there. So you're just doing it because you believe in this thing, right? You just have blind faith that you can make this happen. You can will it to reality. For one hand, that's an amazing thing because like I can relate to some extent to exactly what you're saying. When you're up and you're just doing it, there's this, you're just finished up and you close your laptop and and there's like moment of like, you're tired, but like accomplishment, like, all right, I did this. There's no tangible results yet, but like you feel good. And then if you keep doing it and then the tangible results manifest, oh man, you just, you like, it's such a good feeling. Like you have purpose. So that's a cool thing. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it is so rewarding, and it is that closing of the laptop. That's what you did it for. Because if you have that little feeling 100,000 more times, then maybe you'll be rich. Or you'll impact somebody, or you'll achieve your dream, whatever it is.
Right.
But it is so hard to get up and do that. And there's some days when you're just so beat tired, and you get kicked. Like, it was interesting because in 2008, I worked at Quiznos, the largest franchise implosion in the world. And I originally started there as the franchise assistance manager, and then I got promoted to more ops services type stuff. But I remember we were visiting Quiznos in Detroit, January 2009, and we went into a store, and it was one of the original stores because it had the black and white tile. It was very Italian looking, like the 1980s version of that store. And like off behind that strip center was a gigantic GM factory. And it looked like what I would imagine like a factory in Russia would have looked like, or like where Batman would have come running out of. Like, it was just dark, and they were retooling that factory for the next 2 years to make the next version of a truck. So this guy's in the 2008 Detroit, like 2009 downturn. And he's got this gigantic factory behind him, this ominous, almost like out of a movie, right? And it was just empty. And you're just sitting there, and there's nothing you can do, man. Like, like you're just looking at this guy, and he's like, I'm here, I'm making it happen. But I just knew, like, you can't make a factory turn back on, and then you have 10,000 people working there 3 shifts a day, and they all go away. That's a large percentage of your business. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't think delivery was delivery was kind of a thing at that time, but it wasn't easy to execute. It wasn't like today where you can cater your way out of this or something. It's pretty scary.
That's a horribly scary scenario. And I mentioned to some extent I had a similar thing. I luckily enough, like I said, at that point in time, we already had location number 2. And it was interesting because the sales growth in location number 2 and the sales decline in location number 1 were absolutely inversely correlated. So like,
no money.
Yeah, like, but it saved us, right? Like, we stayed in the restaurant business. We didn't become that statistic that we by all means should have, by the way. Like, going into the business the way we did with just like total like bootstrap, like, we, but that scenario you describe, and it's scary, and it's a reality for so many people that when it does happen. And it's interesting, on a side note, right around 2009, I looked at Quiznos. I actually talked to, can't remember the guy's name, but he showed me there was a couple of locations here in the Philadelphia area. And I don't know, by chance or by what, but we just, that wasn't the route we went, and knock on wood.
Man, I tell you, back then in 2009, you could have walked into a Quiznos and taken over the lease, and that guy would have walked out the door. And you probably potentially could have been successful at that. Subway and Quiznos built themselves on the backs of their franchisees, and the first guy would go bankrupt because the build out was so high. The second guy would buy it for like $152. So it'd be like a $400,000 to $500,000 build out. Second guy built it at $2. He'd go bankrupt on that loan service. The third guy would get it for like 50 or below, and that guy could make a go of it. But Quiznos really was, and I don't think they're this way today. I hope they're not, but I don't think they are. But at the time, they made most of their money on their food distributorship. So they would go, hey, we're doing a prime rib special, right? Well, they would just drop ship a $500 case of prime rib to every store. So that's what they were making on their money, was on the food, not on the royalties. And it was brutal. I didn't know anything about it. I just got like, literally, I was writing this earlier. I got like a temp job there because I'd gotten laid off. And then I got a temp job working in their franchise assistance program. And then I was there for like a week. And then the manager was like this young kid. And he's like, yeah, I'm moving out of here. I'm taking off. And then they just promoted me to be the manager. And then I was the manager of the program. And then I ran it for 10 months. And then, just like any other restaurant job. And then I did really good I did well at that. So they promoted me to a different position and actually kept me on when they fired 320 people. So that had
wow.
That was you dodged a bullet with those Quiznos. Sandwiches in general are so fickle. Like, there's always a hot sandwich chain for like 5 to 10 years, and then it becomes the next one.
Well, it's interesting because like, if I remember the numbers somewhat vaguely, but I think in the ballpark, it was like $50K to buy into franchise fee plus $50K, just essentially equipment package that was used in one of these Quiznos. But the guy was doing like, I want to say like $650 revenue. Yeah, and this is 2009. This is, that
was a good location.
2009. Yeah, so he was in that, and we looked at it, and I completely remember what was killing him was his debt service. It wasn't.
Yeah,
the store was cash flowing. It wasn't cash flowing a ton of money, but it was cash flowing, EBITDA wise. But his net, because of that, was so the story you just kind of aligned. Yeah, it completely explains. He probably was in it for I don't know what.
Yeah. Well, the other interesting thing that killed Quiznos, just in general, just something to be aware of, is rents, because rents are going crazy again right now. The entire Quiznos went from like less than 1,000 units to like 5,000 units in like 5 to 6 years. And that all went from like 2002 to like 2008, right? Like in that time frame that they've been around since the early 90s. But like, so that was when the real estate boom was happening. And so they were paying $4,000, $5,000 a month in rent. Well, as you know, if you're a restaurant at $4,000 or $5,000 a month rent, like, you have one little slowdown, just even like a couple weeks, you could miss your rent payment for that month. That's such a high rent. And Quiznos didn't secure those rents. Subway did. Subway would go to the guys and go, hey, we'll keep paying rent if this guy goes out of business so we can get another franchise in there. So Subway would get half the rent that we would be paying in competition, is what I had heard. So it's nuts. Okay, question number 4. What are some of the challenges you guys are facing right now? Like, what are your big challenges?
So right now, we got some challenges right now. Profitability is a big one. For years and years building this whole thing, There was a certain profitability target, EBITDA profitability target that we would aim for, and we could outperform our peers based, on the systems that I've mentioned that we have in place. And, with the emergence of the third-party delivery, that cuts into your profitability tremendously. In average, a third-party order, they will charge you, let's say, call it 25% of whatever that order costs. If you think about it, 25%. There's hardly restaurants making 25% margins. So if you're giving up 25%, it's coming from somewhere. And originally, pre-COVID, the idea of these third parties was, well, these are incremental sales. These are sales that are in addition to your normal sales. That's shifted. It's not the case anymore. I look at our restaurants. Our group of restaurants are pretty healthy. We do average of $1 million plus per location. So, for a quick service salad concept, that's a decent number. But if you're bringing 20, 30% of that number in third party sales, and there's a 25% quote unquote tax on it, or your profitability suffers tremendously. It's been cut like in half. So figuring this out is quite difficult. First of all, identifying specifically under which circumstances you're experiencing those less than profitable sales, right? You have to seclude them, identify exactly what they are, and then understand what do we do with them? This is what all I've been doing probably for this year. I identified the profitability declines last year. I saw that, and then only by this year, because it happens slow. It's not like overnight. And then the other thing that has layered on top of it is customer counts have been dropping. And again, I don't think I'm the only one in that boat, but like across the board, anybody I talk to, unfortunately. So, and it's the most peculiar thing. The customer counts that are dropping are not the DoorDash customers. They're the in-store customers. The DoorDash customer seems not to be as affected, or at least yet, by the higher prices and things like that. But the person that actually comes to your store and buys your product, in our case, our salads, they're the ones who are coming less frequently. So, there's this double thing happening where profitability has just shrunk because of this, disruptor in that industry. And then on top of it, we're coming down in sales. So, that's a challenge. I think we'll fare okay with it. I'll make a lot less money, but we'll fare okay until somehow it's resolved, whether we can come up with some creative solutions or the industry adjusts or, whatever. But it looks, I think, as a whole in the restaurant business, and I don't mean to be, the doom and gloom here, but I think there's going to be a lot of people that, who are not correctly positioned. They're gonna get their butts kicked. And it's a shame but the scenario you just said, that scenario will now present itself in a different circumstance, where somebody is doing their best and they're turning, to give a very simple example, because I've been trying to explain this to people that are not in the restaurant space. If you do a third party only restaurant, and even if that restaurant is turning $1 million a year, your gross profit before fixed costs out of that, if you're running a franchise that charges a 10%, royalty and brand development combination, you're taking about 15-16% gross profit, out of which all your fixed costs have to come out. So, obviously fixed costs are a lot more than 16%. Yeah. So even if you do $1 million and you can't make money, you're going to be upside down. And that's a real difficult thing to comprehend, that the sales that are coming in, they could be hurting you, not helping you if you're not careful. So that's the challenge. It's figuring that out. I am very positive about the future. I know that when challenges arise, if you're agile, and I've had to do this in the past, and if you're agile and you're creative in the way you handle them, you can come out better and stronger. But it will take away in the immediate, that's for sure.
Well, and the industry, and this is where the inflation is killing the industry too, and the gas prices, right? To get this inflation and these gas prices at the same time, and then all this mandatory labor stuff because now that just raised the boat up, but the inflation and the gas prices, like the restaurants have basically, you're priced to a point now where it's like, okay, I can't really raise prices anymore because it's affecting cover counts significantly. But also now my margin's been squeezed so tight, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's insanity, man. Like, and I mean, like, I'm somebody, like, I could eat out every night of the week if I really wanted to, but we don't, because we're, you know what I mean? Like, it's expensive. Like, you go to these places, and if you're old like me, you anchor yourself to what you used to pay there. And then you're like, man, I just paid $40 for a sandwich. Like, this is ridiculous, right? Like, and that's what's happening to a lot of people too. And then you throw the delivery on there, which I was amazed that I saw some numbers recently. The delivery was actually growing still.
Yeah.
But it's got to be. It's people without kids.
It has to be, right? So, like, this is the weirdest thing, because that part of my revenue stream, that order channel or revenue channel, it's increased, while the in-store, like, has decreased. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, that is, I see that and I'm like, oh gosh, that will continue negatively affecting profitability. All the things that you touched on obviously are also 100% there. Our labor in the last 4 years has increased, insanely. I mean, state mandated minimum wage increases. New Jersey is at 15. PA isn't there yet, but whatever the PA minimum wage is, we're not paying that to anybody. That's just not reality in the market. Which, I got to be honest with you, it's just my mindset. I'm totally okay with what the market dictates. If the market dictates that, this is the minimum wage, and the state says this is the minimum wage, but you're paying this. That's just the reality that you're dealing with. But that reality obviously is, it's cost us. And yeah, of course, we've increased prices. And one of the things we did not take a price increase in 2023 at all. Where before all of this craziness, before the inflationary pressures, my locations were always some of the highest in pricing. I always felt like, hey, we sell a premium product. I have a premium, decorated store with great customer service. I'm going to be at the top of this. And then all of a sudden, all of this has happened, and I found myself way behind in pricing. In 2023, I just felt like, well, I just went from selling salads at $9.49 a salad to, $11.49 a salad in a matter of 3 years. We can't continue doing this. This is, we'll have to eat some of the costs. So 2023, we didn't increase prices, and that was a mistake, unfortunately. I was really looking out for the benefit of our customer base, right? I thought, well, hey man, what you just said, if I put myself in the shoes of a customer, we go out to like a Panera with my family of 5, wife and 3 kids, it's over $100. Yeah. It's like, I just spent $100 at Panera. Like, what did we just do? And I realized, obviously, if I'm thinking this, everybody else is thinking the same thing. It's, very few people are truly immune to the discomfort of spending these sums of money on quick service restaurants or anything else that we're doing. So there's rollback. There's some pressures, and they're very, very difficult to manage. I feel very bad for people who, they jumped into a business, let's say like 2018, 19, and they're running a business where they could make a living. They were, like the typical restaurant owner operator, where the guy's making, $130,000 a year, $150,000 a year. And in 2018, 19, he was doing well. And then with everything that's happened, that's down to like $50,000 a year today. And I'm like, man, if that guy had any debt, that hypothetical guy or girl, I don't, what are they doing? How is this even working? So yeah, that's a real issue. We'll see how we can fare through it.
Yeah, when I was at franchise assistance program, there would be people like, I had to go get a day job to pay to keep my Quiznos open. That was always their thing. You guys make money on everything, and I'm losing money. That was always what they were telling me, and I couldn't disagree. It was brutal. I do want to talk about one. I'm going to switch gears slightly with you real quick. I'm curious about these new FDA regs coming down, and just as lettuce is like probably spinach and romaine are some of the two of the most dangerous, food borne. You have essentially a business where everything is cold and fresh. So what does your company do to make sure this lettuce and stuff you're getting is safe and just all this produce, right? Because you're not cooking anything to kill anything.
So it's interesting, right? So for one hand, it's very dangerous. On the other hand, it's completely not. So I'll explain. I'll unpack that, right?
Yeah.
So if you're cutting lettuce fresh, right? You've received a case of lettuce, and our method is 2 cases of iceberg per 1 case of romaine. If you're going and following the right procedures in terms of taking that lettuce out, cutting it, washing it, drying it, putting it through a lettuce spinner, there's no problem.
Sure.
None of these foodborne, the stuff that affects lettuce, none of it is in the lettuce. It is on the lettuce.
Sure.
So if you go through the right process of prepping this food, and it's a 2 hours a day, 1.5 hour a day of somebody's labor of doing this, in our situation, yeah, it's a lot. Like it's a big effort. Obviously, a lot of people I'm sure are kind of interested in taking shortcuts and things like that. But if you do it the right way, there's no problem. If you don't do it the right way, there's a big problem. You're taking stuff that's coming out of the dirt that I'm not going to dive into that, but all the stuff is on it, right? So you just got to wash it. You got to really wash it. That's it. So in our operations, we have a lot of the produce we receive is coming pre-prepped, and you open a bag and it's ready to go. Some of the stuff is coming where it's raw, and then you just you prep it yourself. I've always been on the side of the raw and then you prep it yourself in store, just because of the freshness that provides you. Although I will say that if you buy lettuce from one of the production plants, it's so good now. They really do a fantastic job. It goes from farm to our stores within 5-6 days. It's crazy, the logistics that they've been able to put in place. But even with that having been said, most of our restaurants, we're prepping on a daily basis. And I think we're going to continue doing that, because that's the safest way. I can actually manage that process. We get kind of best of both worlds. You get a really fresh product, and it's been handled correctly.
And it's a little bit cheaper too. So
it is a little bit. So that used to be that. Honestly, I got to be on the math side of it. That used to be the reason why I would do it. Hey, I've got a guy in my store anyways. He might as well spend the next 2 hours. Now with the labor having gone up so much, and and that guy is not. You can't just grab any 16-year-old Bobby or Susie and say, hey, go. You're working a machine. There's blades. There's a skill to this. So now you got a qualified person who doesn't make, $13-14 an hour. They're making significantly more in his hour. Now, in that comparison, well, that labor cost versus what I pay extra. And I got to be honest with you, paying extra is not extra anymore. The labor is more expensive. Yeah. But at least at this point in time, I still lean towards the freshly in-house stuff than I do the off-the-shelf stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just curious about that, because we do a lot with food safety and stuff, and I was just curious if because those FDA things are coming down next year, 2025, 2026, right? That you'll have to track all your lettuce and where it came from and all that. Yeah. But I assume that your suppliers
are doing that now
for you. Yeah.
Yeah. So we belong to a control purchasing group. So we deal with Cisco, but the managing partner through that is I forget their name, but and they require any of our suppliers to track from farm to us, right? Nice. So that's already in place, and obviously there's a premium to pay for that, but that's a good thing to have, especially in with what we're doing. Safety is that's one thing that so many people overlook whenever they look at a restaurant. And I'm like, there's hundreds, in our case, thousands of people every day coming in and out and eating the product that we're making. There's a huge responsibility there for food safety. I mean, it's not a cool and glamorous thing. It's not like the customer service part or the quality of the, how good the food looks. No, this is behind the scenes. It's arguably more important than anything else. So that's a real thing.
Yeah, it's funny because there's sort of two groups of people in the restaurant industry that I've encountered over the last decade. And I mean, obviously been in this business for 30 plus years now. But it's like the people that actually care about food safety and they get it and they're like, oh my God, this is so important, right? Because you forget that like little old lady that came in might be on chemo right now and have no white blood cells. And if you get her sick, she's going to go down like that. Or that kid, like that's who you're doing it for. You're not doing it for like the 30-year-old healthy person who's going to like maybe get a little diarrhea. You're doing it for the person who's like immune compromised because of something stupid. And now they're like really toast. And also because it's your responsibility and you should be a good person and do the right thing for your business and everything else that goes with it. And then there are those people who just get it. And there's generally systems people and data people and they get it. And then there's the other group of people that are like, but those people exist out in the world and you go to their restaurants and you go, oh my God. And I mean, I'll walk out of a restaurant, I mean, obviously we all know to go look at the bathrooms, right? But like if you walk into a restaurant and you're like, this is a little sketchy in here, that's the first place I go, I'm going to go wash my hands real quick. And if the bathroom's nasty, I'll leave, every time.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. There are people who get it and people who don't. And, there are people who just, because they're data-driven, get it. And then there's those like who just intuitively know, right? Yeah. Like you just can't, and it's interesting what you just said, right? Like, I'm going to kind of expand on. So just doing the right thing, I really like, whether it's food safety or customer management or employee management, or if you just do the right thing ongoingly, you will build a good business. Yeah. Like you may not have the most profit in the immediate, like today, but if you just continuously do the right thing over time, like little baby steps, you grow profitability, you grow revenue, you grow a great staff. You attract the good people, and then the good people don't want to leave because they like working with you because you treat them right. The customers come in and you treat them right, and they keep and it just you serve the right food, and so you just do the right thing over and over and over. Like, be a good person.
Yeah.
All throughout, and you'll do well. It's so simple from one hand, but it's for whatever reason, I don't know, how more people don't just see it that way. Like
No, you're totally right. And it's like, it's like every time you do the right thing, it's just like you put like a nickel in like a jar, right? And then eventually that jar is going to get full and it's going to be worth a lot of money, right? And it's the same thing because, the personality, this business is not that complicated. This business is not complicated, but it's not complex, but it takes, there's just a skill to it. And you got to be you have to have the right temperament and the right skill to make it happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, but that part of it, it just seems so obvious. And maybe this is like seeing it that way is also like a talent, right? It's just it's not a tangible thing. Like if a guy runs fast, we can say, well, he's got a talent for running, right? Maybe this thing is like also a talent to be able to perceive it. But at the end of the day, I got to tell you, I just look at all of this and just business in general, and I think, man, capitalism is a very self-serving thing, but it's also a hugely beneficial thing when it's done correctly to be self-serving, right? Because you're forced to treat everybody really well around you in whatever thing you're doing, and that will result in you doing well long term.
And when you don't do that, you go out of business.
Yeah, exactly, right. And if you if you get people sick, you're going to go out of business. You're going to go bankrupt. You might go to it's like bad things will happen.
Yeah. Well, and we have a big food safety component to what we do, and it's just like you don't need food safety record keeping 99.9% of your business, but the 1% that you do, you really need it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it's just like it's insurance, right? Everybody hates paying for insurance until you get your car smashed and then they just write you a check for $100,000. You're like, oh, cool. There we go.
That worked out.
Hey, man. I know we were probably good enough on it here. It's war story time. So give me a war story. I work 60 million hours in a row or whatever it is. I'm dying to hear them. These are my favorite part of the show.
Yeah. All right. I'll give you a war story. So I talked about how we got our first Charlie's. Literally day of graduation from college. I walked, got my diploma, The next day from Penn State, I got into the car and I drove to Columbus, Ohio. That's where Charlie's is out of. I went through their training program, then came back, about 4 days of relaxation, and Monday came and we took over operations of our first restaurant. That morning, we're having coffee. I came back from college, moved in with my parents into the basement, and we're having coffee in the morning, and my father goes, "Hey man, don't F this up. we're gonna be homeless if we." And I'm like, "All right, well, thanks, no pressure." Great.
Yeah.
I get and at this point in time, I haven't met any of the employees that I'm just gonna walk into this thing, right? I've seen all the numbers. I've been to other locations. I've been trained, but this particular one I haven't. So I walk in, and there's 5 or 6 employees. And within the first 10 minutes, I realized none of them speak any English. It's Spanish only. I don't speak Spanish. Well, I didn't speak Spanish. Let me rephrase that. At that moment, I'm like, I don't know how to run a restaurant. I only know how to do it in theory. I've never ran a business. I'm 22, so I'm very insecure in the moment of it all. Ton of pressure, and I have no idea how to communicate with my employees. Man, that was. Jumping into that was incredibly humbling, because whatever I thought I was good at, man, life just smacked the crap out of me and said, "All right, well, now you're gonna have to prove whether you're actually good at anything." And yeah, in the next probably 2 months, maybe a little bit more, I learned conversational Spanish. So in order to run my restaurant, to sell cheesesteaks, I needed this trait, this skill. And I went and got that skill. On my drive, it was a half-an-hour commute to work and from work. So, at 6 something in the morning, I would leave the house to be there by 7-ish. I was listening to CDs back then, right? Audio, basic Spanish, and the same thing on the way home. And, it wasn't it didn't even cross my mind, do I get new employees? No, I'm going to make it work. These guys know what they're doing. They just don't speak the language. Let me learn the language. Yeah. So on top of working 7 days a week, open and close, the other component was all right, now I'm going to, and then fairly quickly, that took place where I started being able to speak Spanish. And I remember the first time, probably 6 months into it, I was hanging out with my buddies, literally 6 months, later, my friend saw me. And I was hanging out, and there was a bread delivery that didn't happen. And my guys were calling me, and I picked up the phone and I just spoke to them in Spanish. And my college friends who've known me, they're like, "What the hell is where did this come from?" It was quite difficult, but such a fantastic experience. I wouldn't, I gotta be I would not trade that in. It was very difficult. No, all kidding aside, but I would not trade it in. It was a good experience. It was a good, moment, proving yourself moment over time.
That's awesome, man. Well, Orhan, this has been a wonderful conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed every part of it. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Tommy, thanks for having me, man. I also enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
Cool. And for all you listeners, we've got a lot of interviews scheduled, and we plan on just releasing them as soon as we get them out. So thank you guys for listening to the show, and take care, Orhan, and we'll talk to you soon, man.
See ya.